Hello and welcome to the Note to File podcast, a collection of interviews, best practices, and candid commentary for clinical research sites. I'm your host, Brad Hightower, founder of Hightower Clinical, a clinical trial site network providing consulting services and end-to-end personalized research infrastructure to physicians with no upfront costs. You can learn more at hightowerclinical.com. If you're enjoying the Note to File podcast, we encourage you to rate, review, and subscribe to the show so we can continue to provide quality content to a larger audience. All show notes, episode transcripts, and contact information can be found at notefilepodcast.com. Our guest today is Donna Symanietz. Donna's a little bit different than most of the people we interview on the show, in so much as she's still on the outside looking in when it comes to clinical research. She has a great wealth of experience in medical sales, and while her career has touched on clinical research in the past, she's still in the process of building her career within the industry. In this episode, we discuss Donna's career journey, what clinical research can learn from sales, and I attempt to talk Donna into opening her own clinical research site, unsuccessfully, unfortunately. Without further ado, Donna Symanietz. All right, Donna, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you.
Awesome. As always, I like to, hear people's origin stories when it comes to clinical research and a little bit about what their experience has been like and the road they took to get there. So tell us a little bit about your experience in clinical research and kind of your road to it.
All right. Thanks, Brad. I probably come from a different pathway, but I actually consider my path very parallel to somebody who's just starting in clinical research. I started off in pharmaceutical sales, medical device, capital equipment sales. And when I first started with my very first job a long time ago, I remember we had a location that was part of some post-marketing research. I remember the day I touched the binder and I was excited and I loved hearing about the post-market research that one of my physicians that I called on was doing. And his engagement with it was great. And he just sent me on a journey that I loved research. I loved reading all the clinical papers that went around with all the drugs or devices that I sold. I have such a passion with taking those clinical studies apart and understanding every tiny little detail, no matter how boring it is, because that's what set one drug or one device apart from the other. And we needed to know every little tiny bit about our drug and our competitor's drug to have informed, intelligent conversations with our physicians to take them on a journey on why to write a different drug for some of their patients. And having that patient in the forefront of our minds all the time was really important to express it to physicians that this is why I'm here. I'm here for your patients. I'm here for them and help with their medical care. And later in my career, I was able to be involved with some more post-marketing research, even if it was just getting physicians to have patients fill out surveys, and back in the day, fax them in, was really important, and I enjoyed it. And then one of my last positions, actually, I was involved with feasibility of locations and seeing how they were doing with their good clinical practices, their just seeing how they were doing with enrollment and listening to all their challenges and kind of being a little cheerleader for them and saying, hey, don't give up and please fill out the paperwork correctly because we need that data. So I was a comic relief and a beggar at the same time to keep them engaged in doing the tiny little bits that it takes for all the clinical research. Wow, Brad, that was a really long answer.
That's okay. Again, it sounds like you're, kind of hitting all the points there for clinical research, the attention to detail, the, sort of patient centricity and, all those nice things that we look for, in working within the clinical research field. So where does that leave you now? Are you looking now to get sort of back or more focused into the clinical research industry? Is that correct?
Correct. I really want to take all the knowledge that I have from sales, marketing, past clinical research, and help move clinical research forward. It sounds like a cheesy little salesy answer, but it's the truth. I have such a passion for the research that I want to do more. I know a lot of research doesn't have the most robust data or the enrollment, and I want to help, I guess. Just I want to help. So with COVID and all the changes, the things that have happened, I realized that for me as a person, there's better opportunities in research. But it also allows me to tap into my passion of research, not just the sales and marketing part of it.
Sure, sure. Well, I mean, and ultimately, I mean, that's why we all do what we do. We're all here to continue to move research and science forward, as well as improve patient outcomes. I mean, it's hopefully that's what's driving everybody who's in the industry to a large degree. I guess tell me a little bit about your hunt. How has your luck been looking for how to get back into the industry or how to sort of change your focus within the clinical research industry?
It's been a little challenging. People think that, they think sales and marketing. I'm not a used car salesman. Okay. People think it's a 4-letter word, and it's really not. I am more of a communicator. I'm a teacher. I'm a coach. I can bring teams together. I get the trust of physicians, patients, clinic teams, and bring them together. Because if you don't have a good team, you can't always meet an objective in a clinical setting or an OR setting.
Yeah, and I think that's you touched on something there. I think there tends to be a sort of, sales is a bad word in clinical research, or it tends to be. Of course, I think that's, ridiculous. I think that the sites and the studies I've worked on that are usually the most successful, we do incorporate those aspects of sales, which the relationship building and the all the different parts that you mentioned that go along with that. I mean, you can't run a successful trial without having a good relationship, trust, and engagement with your physician, much less the patients. I mean, those are ridiculously, I think, understated and underappreciated aspects when it comes to clinical research, especially from the site perspective. And that's where I think, again, it's, sad in some ways that there's such sales is a 4-letter word,
And it's not. I mean, my husband's in sales too. Trust me, we're problem solvers every day. I mean, he goes, I don't sell, I problem solve all day long for my customers.
Well, that's exactly right. And I can say as somebody who's running dozens of studies across dozens of sites, or not running them, but having, some level of involvement. I mean, that's what it is. It's constant problem solving. I mean, that's what makes it fun too, though,
Yeah. And I know it's a challenge. It's a big, it's not really a big change for me. I mean, I know so many different disease states, different drugs, comorbid conditions that you can't have. And I know what cytochrome P450 means and
right.
Pharmacodynamics and pharmacokinetics. I know that's just in my DNA. I love that part of it. And for me to understand his disease state, it comes really quickly and naturally because we've always had to learn them on the fly and learn them quickly. We always were thrown in the deep end of the pool. Here, you're selling this drug now. Learn it in 3 weeks. Go. And I got good at it. And the part that I always loved was, like I said, the clinical papers and taking them apart and seeing how medicine is changing. I think people forget to look at history of medicine, even just think about like insulin, how it has changed. First started off, we used to get it from pigs, and now there's combination insulin. There's different blood glucose testing that anybody can wear on their body and put their phone up to it to see what their blood sugars are. I'm just excited to see what's next around the corner. Because I guarantee you there's something great and wonderful just around the corner that we haven't even heard of. And that's where I want to put my skills and my attention to detail to use and my passion.
Sure. No doubt. And again, that's the beauty of the industry. I think that wherever your interests lie, there's a place in clinical research, whether it be in the, the technical science or whether it be in the relationship building sort of sales side, or, the history, or all together. That's the beauty, I think, again, is that there's a place within the industry for all of those interests, and they all sort of dovetail together. And I think the more complete you are in those, the more successful you're ultimately going to be.
Yeah. Thank you.
That's the hope, isn't it? I mean,
right.
That's what we all hope for. I mean, that's why we do what we do, is it's, aside from helping people, just the fascination that goes into it. So I find your situation to be particularly interesting. I mean, again, I think a lot of people start at a site level with a hope to go to either like a sponsor CRO or even the sales side ultimately. And your experience, you have, like you said, you've had some experience with obviously post-market trials, but it sounds like your focus now is leaning more towards the research side versus the sales. So again, I find that particularly intriguing. Again, I think this will be something that's instructive for a lot of people to see you kind of go through that process. What sort of, if any, I guess, have you been reaching out to, site side or sponsor CRO side, or sort of where are you in that process right now?
I've kind of reached out to a little bit of everything. I've even reached out to some of the old physicians that I've worked with in the past. But even before I started looking, I took a course with Clinical Research Fast Track to kind of basically put everything in order for me in how clinical research is ran. I mean, I know the FDA rules inside out. I mean, standard operating procedures. Oh my gosh, try standard operating procedures of a sales and marketing team. They're a lot tougher.
Right. Right.
And then I also just recently took a course from Clinical Trials Network on GCPs. I just want to make sure I'm buttoned up and ready to go. And then when I do have conversations with, possible career sites, I understand kind of where they're coming from, and they understand where I'm coming from, and how we can, be successful together, and how I will add value to their teams.
Well, I mean, it sounds like, with your background, and if you've been through the Clinical Research Fast Track program, which I've talked to a lot of people who have, and people really seem to vouch, for how, comprehensive and great that program is. I mean, it sounds like you're going to have all the tools, and also, again, coming from that sales background, I think just makes it even more powerful as far as what your capabilities and what you bring to the table. And look, hey, I'm biased, man. I'll tell everybody you should start your own site. If you're able, if you've got the connections, go out there, find a physician to work with, and start hustling up some studies, and the options start to become almost limitless, at that point. And you really get to have a hand in the whole process, from beginning to end. I mean, is that an option that you've considered?
I kind of did. I had a conversation with a physician actually the other day about it too, but unfortunately he just recently moved to Nevada, and I'm like, dude, can you move back, please? Because he wants to retire but doesn't want to retire, kind of situation. And he would have been a great partner to do something like that. I think I first want to go out and work at a site in a location, and then maybe that's something that I would explore. A lot of the physicians that I know already are in research at, like the Mayo Health Clinic, University of Minnesota, or other major institutions. And I'm like, how could I pull those guys away to do my own site?
Right. Yeah, that can be tricky. I mean, for me, it started out with, private practice physicians. I mean, I think that there's a lot of physicians out there who, if they're not affiliated with a university or a hospital system, I mean, they want to do research. They love the ability to do research. The problem is they don't know anything about it. They don't know how to get started. It seems like an exorbitant cost to get up off the ground. But that's where a highly motivated individual with, some knowledge can step in and provide a solution and really create a niche for themselves,
Oh, yeah, I agree. I think physicians don't even actively become involved in research because they look at their day-to-day. I have 35 patients I have to see. How do I have time to do all these other things? And that's where having a good team and somebody who's good at organizing things would help them, or even, they just can't comprehend how to do it. They have the passion for it, but the path is very unclear. And I think that's a short-sighting aspect of research, is there is not a place for some of these physicians who want to do it part-time or do it part of their daily practice, and to explore that. Just think if we had 10% more physicians involved in clinical research, just 10% across the country.
Yeah, that would make a significant impact for sure.
Or even 1%. I mean, it's just looking at those little bits, and that's probably from my training, is you don't eat an elephant in one bite. You have to work at it a little by little by little.
Right.
And getting more physicians involved in clinical research, I would totally jump on that bandwagon and try to help and guide them to a clearer path on how to be more engaged.
Sure. Yeah. And that's it's a tall order. But it's something that needs to be done. I mean, I think there's no question that there's still just a lack of good engaged physicians. Well, I take that back. There's not a lack of engaged physicians. There's just a lack of engaged physicians who have the research infrastructure, who are doing it right and doing it well. So yeah, I think there's a lot of, a lot of opportunity out there. I mean, do you feel like it's been challenging to find a place with your background? It's just sort of where to fit into everything from the, sort of the bigger picture?
Yes, absolutely. It has been. Like I said, I'm afraid there's maybe some stigmatism of my knowledge or lack of, but there isn't. My transferable skills and soft skills are very shiny and bright and ready to get going.
Well, and again, I think that's sort of a unfortunate trend across some research sites and some other institutions, is not taking the chance on people who don't have the more traditional clinical research experience. And, I know this is something that we talked about a little bit offline, is, I very much prefer to hire based on soft skills. I mean, you can train somebody on how to, check some boxes and perform data entry and you can teach them ICH GCP guidelines. All those things are fairly, dry and straightforward things, that can be, easily taught and transferred to someone, but you can't train somebody to, build strong relationships with your physician in order to get the best engagement. You can't train somebody to build trust and relationship with patients so that they are comfortable being in a trial that you will be a part of, or that, or retain them, over the long term, or, going back to just enrollment, so getting on the phone and calling 100 people so that you might be able to get 2 patients in the door. And, as someone in sales, I'm sure that's something you're more than used to.
You have to have a thick skin, this is for sure, and you can't give up. And a no is just a no right this second. You have to move on. I guess we always thought in the future, and you just keep digging at it and you keep working for it. And just because one person says no, you can't stop and cry in your cereal. You got to keep going, because that's how you move the needle forward. Yeah, no,
that's right. That's right. Yeah. I mean, if you stopped at the first no, then you that'd be it. That's it for you. You keep moving.
And you have to. I mean, it's in my DNA. And then you take it with grace too. When they say no, don't get all crowdy. You take it with grace and move on. And then when you find the next one, build that relationship. Get them to understand who you are, that you're a human being on the other end of the line, that you actually care. Yes, I'm going to ask you 1,000 questions that you probably don't want to answer, but that's part of it. And people don't see that or know that in human behavior alone. It's something that some people naturally have, or it's cultivated, but it takes years and years to build that thick skin.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's 100% true. I consider myself very much an introvert, whether or not people believe that, but even doing a podcast or calling patients over the phone is something that, I had to sort of practice myself into being comfortable doing, not something that necessarily comes supernatural for me. So, that's a point well taken, that you've got to cultivate that if it's not something that it's already comes naturally.
Yeah, I'm grateful that I have the gift for gab.
Yeah, we'll say, hey, I can go off on a rant, but again, I'm just a naturally introverted guy. So, being salesy can be tricky for me, but I think that especially when it's something that you stand behind, working in clinical research and being able to offer, potentially new treatments to patients, or help a doctor be able to offer new options to their patients. That's something I stand behind. So it's very easy to talk about and to sell,
Yeah, it's not sometimes just talking about it. It's also about listening to them, listening to what the patient's saying, listening to what the physician's saying, and bringing it together. But because God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth, you got to use them in that proportion when you're dealing with patients or a team or a physician, a pharmacist, anybody. And I always feel like if you have the ability to ask the right question, you're lucky, because if you ask the right questions, you can get them to talk and get them to really connect with you. And so they belong and stay in your study, or they're willing to take that extra effort to fill out a survey or get a physician to spend a little extra time with you explaining something to you better. But you have to take a breath and kind of listen at the same time when you're trying to be supportive.
Sure. Yeah. That can be a trick sometimes, but it's what has to be done. So yeah, no, I'm with you 100% there. Tell me a little bit about, some resources that you use, or things you've used in the past that you think might be useful to our listeners or people within even the clinical research community.
Well, one of the books that I've read in my career was Thinking Clockwise, because the reason why you have to think clockwise and think forward all the time, because things are going to change all around you all the time. But you can't stop the clock and dwell in it. You just got to move forward, understand what's going on, and try not to get brought down from that. And I think even when you're interviewing a patient or you're working with a physician, or your clinical trial changes, you just got to undertake it and then move forward. The book Thinking Clockwise always has these nice little field notes. Like, you don't have to read the whole book. The whole book you can read in like a day. But when you open up the book, they have these little field notes, and sometimes they're just little examples of an inspirational thing that you might need to hear right then and there. And so I think it's always on my desk, no matter where I've been in my career.
Yeah. And I think that's, I love that. So I've worked across different research institutions, throughout my career, and I've worked in places that, they've done things the same way for 15 years, blows my mind. But what I've found to be successful is that, to kind of go back to your point about, always moving forward, but also always evolving and refining your process, as you move forward. Obviously, there are some things in clinical research that are always must remain consistent, consent process and things along those lines. But some of your other things, like they require a certain level of self-awareness so that you can change them on the fly and be opportunistic and be less concerned with being consistent and more concerned with doing what works best. And again, I think that's something I've seen across, a lot of sort of more established institutions. So I think that's, to speak to your point, that's a huge, again, sort of undervalued characteristic that sometimes lacking in clinical research, especially at the site level. So I think that's a very poignant point that you make there. I like that.
Well, also, I think that what I'm doing now 4 years from now could save someone's life, could impact someone greatly if you're working on a new oncology drug. I know it's boring or I don't know, mundane, filling out the same sheet every single day, but that consistency is the foundation to move things forward too. But it also the foundation to open up creativity. You never know what one person's blood pressure is going to tell you about that drug.
Right. No, exactly. Well, and even then the sort of, you've got the, the mundane of the paperwork, but then you've got the creative side of like, how can we engage more patients? How can we, and again, going back to, this is something that could be saving lives. Well, we owe it to ourselves to continue to evolve so that we can include more people who may be positively affected by this or not, or at least get the data to determine whether or not that it is. But, if you're sort of stuck in the same rut and not looking ahead and not moving forward, then, what are you really doing?
Right. I mean, I've sold drugs that were taken off the market that maybe shouldn't have been taken off the market. I've sold drugs that should have never made it to market. So I see that big picture of it on why things are so important, but that's my ability to look at the horizon. But at the same time, you still have to deal with what's right in front of you.
Yep. Nope. I couldn't say it any better myself. Well, anything else you want to add before we sort of start to wrap up here?
Any other suggestions you can give me or advice you want to give me as someone who's entering this journey and who's really excited and has the knowledge?
I would say to certainly keep reaching out as much as possible across, as many networks as you can. I mean, LinkedIn is just ripe with people in the clinical research industry, as I'm sure you know. I think that's where we originally connected, probably.
Correct.
I would certainly keep working those connections. I started out as a research associate 1 or research assistant 1, basically doing data entry at a local university. I know that's probably, you're well beyond that being somewhere where you want to be, but, your universities are oftentimes good. I honestly think you would thrive best in a more private institution or a private research group, just because, frankly, I feel like your skills may be lost on some of the bigger institutions, if that makes sense. Again, I think they sometimes undervalue that. What your background is could potentially be undervalued. Again, depending on where exactly you end up within the spectrum of clinical research.
Well, I'll keep you posted, that's for sure.
Yeah, no, I'd like to check in. Maybe we touch base again and do this in a month and see where you're at and get a little bit more sort of real-time look at, what your search looks like coming from the background that you're from. Again, I think this is instructive for people because there's a lot of people trying to get in the industry in different ways, coming from different backgrounds. So, again, I think the more sort of diverse experiences that, we can share, can all help us get to where it is that we want to be.
Thank you. And I really think of it as my background as a parallel. I mean, I know what it takes.
Well, I mean, from the outside in, it looks like it all dovetails together in a way that makes you a great fit and a great addition to a team. If you want to set up some sites in Minnesota, then, we can start doing some work up there, work together. How's that?
That sounds like a great idea.
All right, Donna, where can people reach out to you or where can they find you online?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn and they can find me there. And my contact information is all underneath there accordingly. So it's the tricky spelling of the last name, though.
Yeah, I had to make you say it for me several times to make sure. And I'm still probably going to say it wrong. Symanietz?
Close. Symanietz.
Symanietz.
Very good.
See, I still did it. I still messed it up. I might have to edit that out. Well, I will post all your contact information as well on the notetofilepodcast.com website so people have an easy one spot to be able to get your contact information. Aside from that, I thank you so much for coming on. Let's maybe get you on the schedule again and see if we can touch base and kind of follow you throughout this process, if that's something you're open to.
Yeah, I'm very much open to that.
Awesome. All right, Donna, thank you so much for coming on, and we'll talk again soon.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Thank you for listening to the Note to File podcast. All show notes, episode transcripts, and contact information can be found at notetofilepodcast.com. And again, please don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe. Thanks again for listening.